For decades, fans believed every mystery surrounding Elvis Presley had been solved. But when scientists extracted DNA from hair strands, preserved in his personal comb at Graceland, what they discovered left even experts speechless. 3 deadly genetic mutations, a legacy of tragedy, and shocking revelations that would forever change how the world understands the king of rock and roll. The comb that held the truth. Deep in the climate-controlled archives of Graceland, tucked away in a simple black box among Elvis Presley's most personal belongings, sat an object that would change history. It wasn't a gold record or a famous jumpsuit. It was a comb, an ordinary tortoiseshell comb that had once run through the king's famous hair. Dr. Patricia Chen stood in the storage room, her gloved hands trembling as she lifted the comb from its protective wrapping. The year was 2024, nearly 5 decades after Elvis's death. She had been conducting a routine inventory of Graceland artifacts when she noticed something remarkable. Strands of dark hair were still caught between the teeth of the comb, preserved perfectly in the controlled environment. The discovery set her heart racing. Hair contained DNA, and DNA could reveal secrets that had been buried for generations. The comb had been stored carefully with other items from Elvis's private dressing room. A note in the archive records indicated it had been set aside shortly after his death in 1977, though no one could say exactly why. Perhaps someone knew that one day, science would advance enough to read the stories written in those dark strands. Dr. Chen immediately contacted her colleagues at the Genetic Portraits Project, an ambitious research initiative focused on understanding the biological makeup of historical American icons. The team had been searching for authentic Elvis material for months. Now they had it. 2 distinct hair samples, both with intact follicles, both capable of yielding complete DNA profiles. But having the comb and testing it were 2 entirely different matters. The Presley estate, fiercely protective of Elvis's image and privacy, even decades after his passing, initially refused all requests. Letters went unanswered. Phone calls led to polite but firm rejections. The family had spent years carefully controlling the narrative around Elvis's life and death. They were not eager to let scientists rewrite it. It took 18 months of negotiations. Dr. Andrew Morrison, the project's lead administrator, made countless trips to Memphis. He spoke with family members, lawyers, and estate managers. He explained that the research could provide answers to medical questions that had haunted the Presley family for generations. He promised absolute secrecy, until the family approved every word of the findings. Slowly, resistance began to soften. Some family members had their own health struggles. They wanted answers. They needed to know if the same conditions that took Elvis might be hidden in their own blood. Finally, permission came through in late 2024. The research team was given access to the comb under the strictest conditions imaginable. Every researcher signed volumes of legal documents. The work would be done in a secure facility behind locked doors. Security cameras would monitor every test. Results would be encrypted and stored on servers with no internet connection. Even within the team, people spoke in careful whispers. No one expected what those hair samples would reveal. No one imagined that a simple comb would unlock secrets hidden in Elvis's very cells. Secrets that explain not just how he died, but how he lived every single day of his extraordinary life. But before the DNA could tell its story, scientists needed to understand the foundation it was built upon, the family history that shaped the king before he ever set foot on a stage. The DNA that built a legend. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stared at her computer screen in wonder. The DNA extracted from Elvis's hair painted a picture far more complex than anyone had imagined. His genetic ancestry read like a map of America itself. Scottish Highlanders, Irish immigrants, and Cherokee people who had walked the Tennessee hills long before it bore that name. Elvis wasn't just a boy from Tupelo. He was a living tapestry of cultures, woven together into one remarkable person. But ancestry was only the beginning. As Dr. Mitchell dug deeper into the genetic data, she discovered that Elvis's family had passed down far more than musical talent. They had also passed down tragedy. The Presley family medical history was a litany of heartbreak. Hearts that failed young, blood pressure that climbed dangerously high, diabetes that struck without mercy. Elvis's grandfather had died at only 46 years old, his heart simply giving out. His mother, Gladys, had been perpetually sick with ailments that doctors could never fully explain or treat. She suffered through mysterious pains and exhaustion that stole her vitality years before her death. This wasn't coincidence. This was inheritance, written in chromosomes and handed down like a family heirloom no one wanted. Yet the same DNA that carried these deadly vulnerabilities also carried extraordinary gifts. Dr. Mitchell pointed to sections of the genetic code that made her colleagues gasp. Elvis possessed gene variants typically found in Olympic sprinters and world-class dancers. His muscles were designed for explosive power and sustained endurance. His nervous system was wired for perfect coordination and lightning-fast reflexes. This explained the performances that seemed almost supernatural, the way Elvis could move for hours without tiring. The control he had over every muscle, every gesture, every hip shake that drove audiences wild. It wasn't just practice or natural rhythm, it was biology. His body was built to perform. But Dr. James Wu, examining the neurological markers, found something even more profound. Elvis's brain chemistry was different from ordinary people. The genes that controlled emotion and mood showed unusual variations. He felt everything more intensely. Joy hit him like thunder. Sadness pulled him down like an undertow. Music wasn't something Elvis chose to pursue. It was coded into every cell of his body, as essential as breathing. The scientists also discovered genes that made Elvis more vulnerable to addiction. His reward pathways in the brain were structured differently. When he found something that brought relief or pleasure, his biology demanded more of it. Combined with a nervous system that never allowed rest, that searched constantly for something it could never quite find, Elvis was designed for both greatness and suffering. Dr. Mitchell spoke quietly, her voice heavy with understanding. Every gift Elvis possessed came with a price tag written in his DNA. The strength for those electrifying performances, the emotion that poured through his voice, the charisma that made millions fall in love with him, all of it grew from the same genetic soil that would eventually destroy him. The pattern was undeniable. The Presley family carried brilliance and tragedy in equal measure, generation after generation. But as the scientists examined the hair samples more closely, they found 3 specific mutations that would explain everything. 3 genetic time bombs that had been ticking since the day Elvis was born. The 3 deadly mutations. At 3:47 in the morning, Dr. Patricia Chen had been awake for 19 hours straight. Her eyes burned from staring at the glowing computer screen in the darkened laboratory. She had run the DNA analysis from Elvis's hair samples through the sequencer 3 times already, certain there must be an error. But when the results appeared for the 4th time, she gasped so loudly the sound echoed through the empty room. Elvis Presley carried a mutation in a gene called SCN5A. This tiny change in his genetic code was extraordinarily rare, appearing in only 1 person out of every 10,000, and it was deadly. The mutation caused a condition called long QT syndrome. In simple terms, Elvis's heart could stop beating without warning, like someone flipping a light switch. No chest pain, no gradual decline, just sudden cardiac arrest. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, a cardiologist specializing in genetic heart conditions, studied the results with grim recognition. He had seen this mutation before in young athletes who collapsed dead on basketball courts and football fields. One moment perfectly healthy, the next moment gone forever. This discovery explained mysteries that had puzzled people for decades. Arguments about prescription substances and lifestyle choices had dominated discussions of Elvis's death. But here was proof of something deeper, something that had been waiting in his cells since birth. Elvis's heart had been a time bomb, ticking quietly beneath every performance, every late night, every moment of stress. But the team wasn't finished. Deep in the mitochondrial DNA, the ancient genetic material passed only from mothers to their children, they found a second devastating secret. Elvis carried a variation in the MTAP6 gene, inherited directly from Gladys. This mutation meant his cells couldn't produce energy efficiently. Dr. James Wu sat in silence, absorbing the implications. Elvis's body was like a car with a faulty engine, constantly running out of fuel no matter how much gas was pumped in. This explained the crushing fatigue, the desperate need for stimulants just to function, the weight that ballooned as his metabolism collapsed. Elvis hadn't been lazy or weak-willed. His cells were literally betraying him, unable to convert food into the energy his explosive performances demanded. The constant exhaustion, the pills that became necessities rather than luxuries, the overeating as his body desperately tried to feed a system that was starving itself, all of it suddenly made terrible sense. Then came the third discovery, and even the skeptics fell silent. Elvis carried a specific variation of the DRD4 gene, nicknamed the Wanderer gene by scientists. This mutation affected dopamine receptors in his brain, the chemicals responsible for pleasure, motivation, and reward. Dr. Sarah Klein, a behavioral geneticist, explained that people with this rare genetic variant were natural sensation seekers. They required more stimulation than ordinary people, drawn instinctively to risk, novelty, and extremes. The same gene had appeared throughout history in explorers, revolutionaries, and artists who either changed the world or destroyed themselves trying. Elvis carried it in abundance. His brain was wired for the stage, the spotlight, and the danger that came with both. A quiet life had never been part of his biological design. The three conditions separately were survivable, but combined in one person they created something unprecedented, a genetic storm that guaranteed both extraordinary brilliance and tragic inevitability. And Elvis wasn't the only one who carried it. A legacy, written in chromosomes. The news of Lisa Marie Presley's death hit the research team like a physical blow. It was January 2023, just months before they had even discovered the comb with Elvis's hair. She had died of cardiac arrest at age 54. Her heart had simply stopped, like a song cut off mid-note. Now, sitting in their laboratory with Elvis's genetic profile displayed on their screens, the scientists felt a terrible sense of recognition wash over them. The pattern wasn't just obvious, it was undeniable. Father and daughter, separated by 46 years, bound by the same fatal genetic thread. The SCN5A mutation that had lurked in Elvis's DNA was inherited. It passed through bloodlines like a whispered curse, generation after generation. Medical records obtained through careful legal channels, and family cooperation suggested Lisa Marie had struggled with similar cardiac vulnerabilities throughout her life. The same heart that had given out on her father had ultimately claimed her too, but the tragedy went even deeper. Benjamin Keogh, Lisa Marie's son and Elvis's grandson, had died 3 years earlier at only 27 years old. While his death wasn't from heart failure, the same restless desperation seemed woven through his short life, the same inability to find peace, the same darkness that had shadowed his grandfather. Geneticists on the team began mapping what they called the Presley signature, a unique combination of genetic markers that appeared again and again in family members. The cardiac vulnerability from the SCN5A mutation, the metabolic struggles from the mitochondrial disorder, the dopamine receptor variation that brought both brilliance and torment. It wasn't just Elvis. It was a legacy written in chromosomes, handed down like fine china or family silverware, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. The research revealed a devastating truth. 3 generations of Presleys had been touched by the same genetic storm. Each one had inherited pieces of the puzzle that made Elvis extraordinary and tragic. Riley Keough, Lisa Marie's daughter and Elvis's granddaughter, suddenly became the face of an impossible ethical question. At 35 years old, she carried genes that might predict her future. Did she have the right not to know what was written in her DNA? Did the public have the right to that information? Where did scientific curiosity end and human dignity begin? The Presley family fractured over the revelations. Some members wanted complete transparency, believing knowledge could save lives through early intervention and careful monitoring. Others saw the research as grave robbing dressed in laboratory coats, a violation of privacy that extended beyond death itself into the lives of the living. Priscilla Presley released a statement condemning the entire project. Neither Elvis nor Lisa Marie had ever consented to this invasion, she insisted. The family's humanity was being traded for scientific curiosity, their private pain put on public display. But other voices emerged from the family tree. Distant cousins who had lost children to sudden heart failure, relatives who struggled with unexplained exhaustion and mysterious weight gain, people who finally had answers for why their bodies betrayed them, why simple tasks sometimes felt impossible, why they felt fundamentally different from everyone around them. Yet even as families debated and ethicists argued, something strange began emerging from the data itself, something that would make everyone question whether they were really looking at Elvis Presley's DNA at all. Numbers that didn't match. Dr. Patricia Chen made her discovery on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She was running routine verification tests on the hair samples from Elvis's comb when the numbers on her screen looked wrong. She blinked hard, adjusted her glasses, and ran the analysis again, then a fourth time. The answer remained the same: impossibly wrong. The DNA extracted from the comb didn't match Elvis Presley's verified family members the way it should. The mitochondrial DNA, the kind passed directly from mother to child without changing, showed variations that shouldn't exist. It was like a puzzle piece that almost fit, but had edges slightly off. Close, but not quite right. Dr. James Wu stared at the data for 6 straight hours, his confusion growing with each passing minute. Either their testing equipment was fundamentally broken, or something very strange was hidden in this genetic code. The implications were staggering. The team went into overdrive. They tested their equipment using samples they knew were absolutely correct. They sent portions of the hair to 3 independent laboratories for verification. They double-checked every step of their extraction and sequencing process. Every single test came back with the same answer. The DNA in those hair strands was similar to Elvis Presley's, similar enough to be a relative, but not similar enough to actually be Elvis himself. Dr. Rodriguez studied the results with meticulous care. The genetic similarity was approximately 94% to verified Presley family members. This matched what scientists would expect from a cousin or an uncle, but not from Elvis Aaron Presley himself. The shocking, impossible truth stared back at them from the screen. This DNA wasn't Elvis's. The laboratory descended into chaos. Scientists argued in heated meetings that stretched past midnight. Some insisted the comb had been mislabeled decades ago when it was first archived. Perhaps someone at Graceland had accidentally mixed up Elvis's belongings with those of a family member or employee. Others suggested that nearly 50 years of storage, even in controlled conditions, could have degraded or contaminated the samples beyond reliable analysis. But a small group of researchers began asking a question that nobody wanted to hear spoken aloud. What if this meant something else entirely? What if the implications were far more disturbing than simple mislabeling or contamination? Dr. Sarah Klein's voice trembled as she voiced the unthinkable. What if the comb truly came from Elvis's personal collection, preserved exactly as the archives indicated, and yet the hair caught in its teeth had never belonged to Elvis Presley at all? The conspiracy theories that had simmered quietly for decades suddenly exploded. Online forums crashed from overwhelming traffic. Social media erupted with hashtags demanding answers. Photographs from Elvis's funeral were analyzed frame by frame, people noting the closed casket, the face that looked waxy and strange, the rumors that had never quite died. The comb had been stored in a black box at Graceland, among Elvis's most personal belongings. The provenance was clear. The chain of custody was documented. If the hair wasn't Elvis's, then whose was it? And why had it been carefully preserved in his comb for nearly half a century? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found. The world demanded proof, and the scientists had only one option left: a machine so advanced it could see what no technology had seen before. The Swiss machine and final truth. 3 months after the confusing DNA results threw everything into question, a package arrived at the laboratory from Switzerland. Inside, packed in custom foam and surrounded by technical documentation, was a 4th-generation DNA sequencer that represented the absolute cutting edge of genetic science. Dr. Patricia Chen opened the shipping crate with shaking hands, knowing this was their last chance to find the truth. This new machine worked fundamentally differently than the older technology. Previous sequencers read DNA in small fragments, like assembling a jigsaw puzzle piece by piece, leaving room for errors and misinterpretations. The Swiss machine could read entire genetic strands all at once without breaking them apart. More importantly, it could distinguish between DNA that had degraded over time and genuine genetic differences that were actually present in the original sample. Most revolutionary of all, the new sequencer could read epigenetic markers, chemical tags attached to DNA that showed how genes had been turned on and off during a person's lifetime. These markers told the story of how someone had actually lived, what stresses their body had endured, what trauma their cells had witnessed. Dr. James Wu carefully prepared the hair samples from Elvis's comb early one cold February morning. The advanced sequencing would take 72 hours, 3 full days. Nobody on the team went home. They slept on uncomfortable couches in the break room, taking turns watching the progress bar crawl slowly across the computer screen. Coffee cups piled up in the trash. Tension hung thick in the air. When the results finally appeared at dawn on the 4th day, the first thing they proved was identity. The DNA belonged to Elvis Aaron Presley. No question, no contamination, no mystery person. The problems the older technology had detected were artifacts, shadows cast by degraded sections of DNA that the advanced machine could see past, like fog clearing from a road to reveal what had always been there. Dr. Chen's voice cracked with emotion as she announced the findings. It was really him. Every genetic marker matched perfectly. The mitochondrial DNA from Gladys, the chromosomal contributions from Vernon, everything lined up exactly as it should. The hair caught in that tortoiseshell comb definitively belonged to Elvis Presley. Relief flooded the laboratory. Scientists embraced. Some wiped away tears. The conspiracy theories could finally be put to rest. The comb had held exactly what it was supposed to hold, authentic biological evidence of the king himself. But the celebration lasted only moments. As the Swiss machine continued analyzing the hair samples, processing the deeper layers of genetic information, it began revealing a story far darker than anyone had anticipated. The advanced technology showed things about Elvis's biology that explained not just how he had lived, but why he had died the way he did. Dr. Rodriguez stared at her screen, her face going pale. The methylation patterns, chemical scars written on Elvis's genes by life experience, were unlike anything she had ever seen outside cases of extreme trauma, war veterans, or victims of prolonged psychological torment. The king's DNA carried pain beyond comprehension, and the Swiss machine was about to reveal exactly what that pain had done to him at the cellular level. The pain, written in his genes. Epigenetics had revolutionized modern science in ways most people never understood. The study revealed how environment, stress, trauma, diet, and even loneliness could leave chemical fingerprints on DNA, turning genes on or off like light switches throughout a person's life. These changes didn't alter the genetic code itself, but they fundamentally changed how the body read and expressed that code. And in Elvis Presley's DNA, extracted from hair strands preserved in his comb, the epigenetic markers told a story of suffering that left the research team speechless. Dr. Sarah Klein examined the data in heavy silence before speaking. Elvis's cortisol response genes were completely dysregulated. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, was designed to rise during moments of danger and then fall when the threat passed. But Elvis's never fell. His system had been locked in permanent survival mode, flooded constantly with stress signals that never turned off, not even during sleep. The methylation patterns on his immune system genes showed severe suppression. Years of exhaustion and unrelenting anxiety had literally turned off the genetic switches responsible for fighting disease and healing damage. His inflammation markers were catastrophically elevated, consistent with someone experiencing chronic pain throughout their entire body, every single day. Even his dopamine genes, the ones that should have brought pleasure and reward, showed signs of severe depletion, burned out from constant overstimulation. Dr. Helen Okoye, called in specifically to interpret these findings, spoke with grave authority. What they were looking at, she explained, was what happened when a human being was driven past all biological limits. Elvis's body had been slowly consuming itself at the cellular level, breaking down its own tissues in a desperate attempt to keep functioning. The prescription substances that had ultimately ended his life suddenly looked completely different through this lens. They weren't signs of weakness or recreational excess. The genetic evidence showed Elvis had been in constant, unrelenting pain. His stress system was permanently activated. His energy production was failing. The medications weren't about getting high. They were the only thing keeping his damaged biological system functional enough to walk on stage and perform. Dr. Cleany chose her words carefully, her voice soft with compassion. Elvis wasn't an addict in the traditional sense. He was fighting his own biology. His genes were screaming for rest, for silence, for peace. But his world demanded lights, applause, and endless performance. The conflict between what his body needed and what his life required had created a war inside him that he couldn't possibly win. The weight fluctuations that had puzzled fans and critics for years suddenly made perfect sense. The genes controlling metabolism and hunger showed extensive damage from years of gaining and losing weight rapidly, combined with the effects of stimulant medications. Elvis's body had completely lost its ability to regulate appetite, satiety, or energy storage. The physical transformation from the lean, electrifying young man of the 1950s to the bloated, struggling figure of the 1970s wasn't about willpower or discipline. It was about genetic expression gone catastrophically wrong. But perhaps most heartbreaking were the markers related to social isolation. Recent studies had shown that loneliness could alter gene expression, particularly genes involved in immune function and inflammatory response. Elvis's DNA showed patterns that scientists had previously observed only in prisoners held in solitary confinement. Dr. Marcus Webb noted the devastating irony. Despite being surrounded constantly by crowds, despite being adored by millions, despite never being physically alone, Elvis's genetic markers revealed something unbearable. He had been profoundly, biologically alone in the world. His cells had registered isolation as severe as any prisoner in a windowless cell. The team spent 6 weeks writing their report, knowing every word would become part of history. What they were about to reveal would forever change how the world understood Elvis Presley, not as a cautionary tale of excess, but as something far more profound and heartbreaking. The King's final verdict. 6 weeks of careful writing, editing, and fact-checking, the final reports were ready. The statement was written with carefully chosen language. Elvis didn't simply die young. He lived an entire lifetime's worth of stress compressed into 42 years. His body bore burdens that would have broken most people far sooner. The prescription substances found in his system at death were not the cause of his tragedy, but rather a symptom of a much deeper biological crisis that had been building since birth. When the report was released simultaneously to the Presley estate and select media outlets, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The conspiracy theories that had raged for months after the initial confusing DNA results suddenly evaporated. People stopped whispering about fake deaths and hidden identities. More importantly, people stopped judging. The genetic evidence was irrefutable. Elvis hadn't been weak or undisciplined. He hadn't thrown away his talent on substances and excess. He had been fighting a battle that was literally coded into every cell of his body, a battle between the extraordinary gifts that made him a legend and the devastating vulnerabilities that came packaged with those same gifts. Dr. James Wu spoke at a press conference, his words measured and clear. Elvis Presley didn't fail at being human. He succeeded at being superhuman for as long as his biology could possibly sustain it. The fact that he performed at all, given what we now know about his genetic condition, is remarkable. The fact that he did it for 23 years and created the body of work he left behind is nothing short of miraculous. The Presley family, fractured by months of debate over the research, began to heal. Priscilla Presley released a statement acknowledging that while she still had reservations about the invasion of privacy, she was grateful that Elvis's struggle was finally understood. Lisa Marie would have wanted people to know the truth, she said quietly in a television interview. She struggled with the same things her father did. Maybe this knowledge can help others who carry similar burdens. Medical professionals began recognizing the broader implications. The combination of conditions Elvis carried, the cardiac mutation, the metabolic disorder, the dopamine variation, could exist in other people who might never know they were at risk. The research sparked new screening programs and genetic counseling initiatives. Elvis's DNA, preserved by chance in a simple comb, was now saving lives. Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter, made a decision that surprised many. She underwent genetic testing and shared her results publicly. She carried some of the Presley markers, but not all of them. Armed with knowledge, she could take precautions, monitor her health, and make informed choices. The curse, she said, could be broken with understanding and medical intervention. The comb that had started everything was returned to Graceland, placed back in its black box among Elvis's treasured belongings. But now it carried a different meaning. It wasn't just a grooming tool that had once touched the king's famous hair. It was the key that had finally unlocked the truth about a man the world thought it already knew completely. Elvis Presley had lived as his DNA dictated, brilliantly, desperately, and far too briefly. The legend wasn't diminished by the scientific findings. If anything, it grew larger, deeper, and infinitely more human.